Recording. Okay. Can everyone see the screen? Yeah, okay. So this is the application form. This year, we're calling it a request form because we wanted to make it pretty simple for returning sites in particular, especially if you're going to have your same kind of program design. So that's why it's been going out with request form, but it will formally be an application if it's a new project or a new site. So everything is also, hold on, where's the... Okay, so this is the main form. So this is like the front page, which has all the instructions and stuff. So your requests are due June 8th, so in 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. But if you need more time, that's fine. And I'll go over why that feels like a quick turnaround, but just know it's not something we're stressed about. Like June 8th is not a firm deadline. It's just more so we can kind of roll out the notice of awards quicker or sooner than later, but we can also match your timeline. We do have an instruction document, which you also received in your email. So you can look at that and we'll be going over that together as well. And then if you want more individualized conversations, you can of course schedule them with me. I'll probably bring Carly into those, but you can always get on my calendar to kind of talk through stuff if you have questions. So the program is staying the same. It's still focused on retention of first gen, low income and or students of color. The main components of the grant are the same. So this is form stack for those of you that are new. And so you can save and resume later. You are the only one who will have access to that like save to that link. So we don't have access to it and we will not have access to any draft information. So just make sure if you are doing that, save to resume later, that you keep that email from the system like live, because we won't be able to recover any data for you. But it is a nice option because it gives you the option to kind of work and come back and forth. So before we kind of get into the application components itself, I want to go back to the request form because this is where it outlines everything that you need to know about the grant, which again is primarily the same. The only things that will have changed, right, is kind of our living allowance and stuff like that. So we'll kind of go over that. But yes, so all of this is literally verbatim. It's the same thing from what's in the host site application that I just showed you. So this is what I want to dig into. And so something else to know about Google Forms, so that you can always click this little button and it gives you like, so you can pop around if it seems like it's just a lot of scrolling and you want a specific thing, you can do that there. But so for the slot types this year, for the position options, we're still going to have our full-time slots, which are 1,700 hours over 11 months. Their living allowance increased a little bit, so it's 22,500. The education award also increased a little bit for those folks. So now it's just shy of like 7,000, which is awesome. And then the host site fee, we did have to increase the host site fees a little bit this year to keep up with our match requirements. But so they're generally, I think, like a third. I think I tried to do the math, so it was like a third of whatever the living allowance is. And your fee for that just goes directly towards our costs of paying out that living allowance for them. So we also have the halftime positions. Their living allowance is $12,000. Education award about $3,400. And then the host site fee is $4,500. We have the student leader minimum time, which is like where we pay those minimum time. Those are probably going to be most of your students, your current college students who will be mentoring their peers, will be in the 300-hour category. If you want them to receive a living allowance from us, then you'd select the student leader slot type, and their living allowance this year is going to be $4,000, and the host site fee is $1,600. And then if you wanted them to just be what we call education award only, so they're not getting a biweekly living allowance, then you would just select the regular minimum time, and there's no fee associated with those other than match, which we'll get into later. And the education award for both of those is like $1,400. So, and that was also an increase. And then we also have the abbreviated time positions. which are 100 hours. We are going to start doing living allowance for those types of positions. So you again have the option. So basically student leader, the term there is just to indicate that they're going to be paid, and they may have additional responsibilities if you have like one paid member and then some unpaid members or ed award only members. So that's really what the term student leader is in front of it, but just know that's kind of an internal thing. But so if you would like us to pay out a living allowance to your abbreviated time members, that is set at $1,300. And then the host site fee for each of those positions is $550. And then you can just choose to have the education award only, like if you have federal work study or something. So then you would just choose the irregular abbreviated time category, and then they would just get the education award, which is $388 and some pennies. So the thing to note for the term lengths is that if they are a paid position, like they're receiving a living allowance from us, then they are pretty much locked into the term length. So what you see here is 11 months, right? 9 months, 9 months, and then student leader paid from us is going to be 5 months, I think is what we anticipated. That could change though, because I think we only have 1 or 2 folks that are doing a paid. But anyway, those are locked in because we have to consistently pay them. Like we as the program, if we're distributing the living allowance, we have to pay them at a consistent rate, regardless of like where their host site is, like if they're with you or another campus. So that's why those are locked in. And then the ones that are education award only, those have some leeway. So minimum time, that's usually just over the academic calendar. Sometimes it's condensed if it's like a short-term summer thing. Abbreviated time, same kind of a thing. Since they're unpaid, we have a lot more flexibility in kind of matching what you would like to do with those members. This would obviously change. So okay. Any questions about slot types? Okay, we'll move on. Member activities, so those are approved, right, and going to stay the same, especially if you are not changing your program design, but you can look over what our approved activities list is. But just know our goal, if you are not changing your program design, is that we'll keep your same position description. There might be some tweaks needed here and there just for like the updated language based on current OIG audits, but that's kind of our intention, is that we won't have to rework your position description because this program model is able to keep the same PD from year to year. So you can click that there as well. The prohibited activities list is the same. There's nothing new to note this year. So just keep those in mind. The host site fee, so I covered that in the slot. So just know your fee payments. So we bill those out quarterly. So if you have a member, knock on wood, who ends up, hopefully this doesn't happen, but if they end up leaving halfway through their term, we would not reimburse you for any costs you had already paid. So if you paid the first 2 quarters of the host site fee for that position, you wouldn't be reimbursed for those, but we wouldn't charge you for the remainder of their term because they're no longer in that position unless you were to refill it, and then we would move forward from there. But just so you know, that's how that works for the host site fee or the cost share. Match requirements is what I want to spend a little bit more time on today. So match is a really big part of the AmeriCorps state grant, as you all should know. And so we still have the same types of match from the last program year that you can choose from. So the first and the most common one is supervisor time. So those are any personnel costs that you or your staff that you work with on the program spend directly supervising members. And we have a list here of what is allowable or not allowable according to AmeriCorps, according to the federal government, about what a supervisor time is. And so that's really just anything that you are doing directly supervising them and not just doing like prep work for the program or working alongside a member. So this list has not changed from the current program year. But so just keep this in mind. These are what you can do. And I did create a little calculation sheet this year, so I'll go over that in a little bit, but just so you know, this is where most folks do do provide match. There is also the option, if you provide your members free housing or a housing benefit or discount, you can claim that as a match. And so just note that you can't pay it directly. So you can't say, well, I'm going to give the member like $400 a month to go towards their rent, and you just give them cash. You have to pay it directly to the property manager or to like your Department of Res Life if they're living on campus. So you can't just give them cash. It's a little complicated if they're maybe like living at home, right? And they're paying rent to like family or like a spouse. So we just need additional documentation for that, but that is an option if you would like to do that, especially if you have a bigger cohort of members. Sometimes that can really just cover as much match as you need it to. And then the last option is just paying an additional cost share or a fee. So if you don't want to go through the hassle of all of that paperwork, you can just be billed out per position. So we have the additional cost share option here. And this is really just so that, you know, we, regardless of what type of position that you want to have in the program, we are required to have match for them. And that's really where these calculations come into, is like, what is the match that we need for each position type? And so you would just be billed for this once your cohort has been enrolled. And it would just be, this is per member. So, but that is an option for folks. And then there's the list of unallowable sources of matching. And then the other thing I really want to note is the personnel funding. So back up here, right, where I talked about the match supervisor time, where this is just in kind, like this is you just documenting it and it's just in kind. The personnel funding is really great if you have, you know, full-time, half-time, or if you have more than 4 members at an abbreviated time or minimum time level, because you're going to most likely be submitting the same documentation anyway. And so why not get reimbursed for this? And so this is where the where it kind of where it differs from just the matches. It's not in kind. It's, you would document some of your time as in kind, and then the rest of that time we would reimburse you. So we've kind of gone with a 70-30 split for the most often, but you can, of course, it could be 50-50 split of like what you want to be reimbursed for versus what you count as match. But the minimum is a 70-30 split. And so there's a lot of language here, but the basics to know is that it's the same list, right? This is the same supervisor activity list that's allowable or not. You're going to be submitting the same kind of timesheet, or the cost and effort form is what it's called. And so there's kind of a calculation here that looks like a lot, but it's the same calculation as the match. It's just that you're also doing an additional one for what are you going to be reimbursed for versus what are you just going to count. And so I did create a calculation sheet to help out with this if you're interested to see what that would look like. So here, if the annual staff wages are like, let's say 40,000 for the year, and your annual staff benefits are maybe 20,000 for the year, then your total salary, and this is me just like putting random numbers here, 60,000. So then your hourly rate based on working 2,080 hours a year would be $28.85. Let's say you have 6 AmeriCorps members. So an estimated number of hours needed to supervise. And then I just kind of baseline did 10 hours per month, but you could easily change that. The other thing to note is with this calculation guide is you'll need to make a copy of it. I'm just editing it live for the sake of time. So then this calculation it's already done for you. You can, of course, kind of tweak it based on what you need. But so your total contracted amount for this personnel time would be just like $15,500 roughly. And then 70% of that we would reimburse you or your campus for. So that's around, you know, just shy of $11,000. And then the rest, which would be like 4,000 or 4,600, would be documented as that in-kind match. So this is really nice, especially if you are going to have, you know, 4 to 6 minimum time, abbreviated time, because you're going to go through the effort of doing all of that tracking of your time anyway. So why not get some money from AmeriCorps to do that? So let me pop back over. I know that's a lot. So if you have questions because you haven't done this personnel thing before, please just let me know. But the calculation worksheet should really help with a lot of that. And then the last thing on note here is that for your education award only positions, there are some stipulations. So education award only just means that, right, they're only receiving an education award at the end of their term, and we are not paying them a living allowance. Thus, you are not paying a host site fee, yada, yada. There are stipulations that AmeriCorps sets on what they can be paid, like the maximum amount. The distinction here is that this is only for what they are performing as AmeriCorps. So if you have like a work study situation and some other work study duties are not AmeriCorps overlap, like 1-for-1, then you don't have to worry about that. It's just like if you're doing a 1-for-1, they are AmeriCorps, that's all they're doing for work study, that's all they're doing for this internship, whatever. Then there are maximum amounts that are set, regardless of if we give them a living allowance or not. And that's based off of, I think AmeriCorps is worried about equity across the program, but it's also just based on the living allowance rates. So the minimum time, so this is set by AmeriCorps, or the maximum. These are set by AmeriCorps. So minimum time slot are 300. They can't earn more than $7,392. That's the maximum amount. And then abbreviated time, which is the 100-hour positions, they can't earn more than $2,112. But again, this is for education award only, just to keep in mind if you are doing federal work study or paying them hourly or something, it might just be worth us talking about more, but those are set by AmeriCorps. The things that we don't have to worry about this year, which is actually really nice, is that we don't have to worry about if you're doing a housing benefit or meal benefit on top of living allowance. You don't have to add that up into this maximum amount anymore. Those are just additional benefits of their position and not considered a living allowance or equivalent. So I know that's a lot of information, but this should really just be an overview for most. So read through this, happy to have as many one-on-ones as we need. So then if you hop back over, nope, where did my, there it is. Okay, so if you hop back over to the application form, it's pretty simple. You just put your name or whoever's applying for your campus, your institution, your contact information, and then whether or not you're going to be supervising your AmeriCorps members, because not everyone who completes the application will be actually supervising the members. So if you are, you just say yes and move on. If you're not, you'll say no, and then you'll provide the contact information for who will be supervising them. And if you're maybe still hiring, then you can just say unsure. And we ask this question because we have to know who's going to supervise them. So it's just helpful for us to get that contact information up front. So program priorities and design, this is all the same information. So it's kind of just a review for everyone. So I'll move along. This is the most important question so that you answer the questions that you want. So if you're a new program, or if you have a new design with significant changes, then you will click this and it will make you complete like all of the things. If you're a returning program, it will prompt you to say, if you have, will you have changes in your program design, or if you won't, you'll have the same. So if you have the same, then you just go on. And if you do have significant changes, then you'll have to complete those questions. So these two questions are important and they logic out. I'm going to move forward as if folks don't have significant changes, just for the sake of the group that we have today on the call. So you will select returning, and then you'll select we will have the same program design and service activities. So then we just need to know first the performance measures. So this is the students that your AmeriCorps members will be working with. So think of those as your beneficiaries. So the first question is, how many students will they be serving? So literally just how many will they be working with? And then again, for the performance measures, we only can count folks being served who identify as first gen, low income, and or students of color. So if you know that your program, as most programs that we work with do, if you work with a broader student population, please don't put the all of your students that they're going to be working with, just like try to, the best that you can, estimate out how many students might fit into one or more of those categories. And that's just because that's what we need to know for the AmeriCorps reporting. Same thing for the second performance measure is how many students persist or enroll in classes from one academic semester to the next. So just keep in mind, we do focus on like who persists from fall semester to spring and then spring to, fall. And we have a tracking form that everyone uses. And so this might be the same number, like if you want to have 100% retention for who they're working with and who persists, cool. Persist would also encapsulate, like if you have seniors or people who are graduating, you can still count them as persisting, even if they're not enrolled. Technically, they're still graduating. So that's a good thing. So you can estimate that out as well. So that's the first section with their performance measures and program design. Then we move down to your requested positions, which is the same information that we saw just a bit ago in the Google form. And so this is where you just will say how many positions, how many slots for each type of position do you want? If you don't want any, you can leave it blank, or you could put zeros, whatever you prefer, but they're not required. So it's not like you have to put something somewhere. So if you just want the minimum time positions that are education award only, you could put, however many it is there. If you want some of those and then some of the abbreviated time, you would put them there, and it kind of tells you this isn't correct, but just put what you would like. And then it totals it up for you. Like the form will calculate like how many positions you're requesting, what's the value of those positions, and then also what's the possible host site fee. So that's how that works. It's pretty slick, right? Like I just added a full time and then it calculates it out for you and for us. So that's that section. So you can kind of play around with it, see what you would like. And then we'll move forward from there. The next section is the requested personnel funding. So are you going to request personnel funding? If you say no, it'll take you to the next section. If you say yes, it'll just prompt you to fill out the information, what percent split that you want to do for what we would reimburse you for versus what you want to count as match. And then it will also calculate it out. So I think our total earlier was 60,000. Ooh, that was my bad. Yeah, so 60,000 with a 70-30 split. Or no, that was, our total was like 15,000 actually. Yeah, so then it would just kind of calculate it out for you and for us, as well as the link right here is for the calculation worksheet. So if you do select requested personnel funding, then that is what your match is, because you're going to be contracted out to do the 30% match. So it won't take you to the next question. So if you're not doing personnel funding, you'll select no, and then it will make you put in there what you're going to do for match. So if you're going to do supervisor time, it will make you provide that information. And there's also a calculation worksheet, which is basically the same. It just doesn't do the 70-30 split. So there is another worksheet here that you can use to kind of calculate out how much match you think you would be able to provide for supervisor time. And then if you select the member housing benefit, then you would just say, are you doing housing on campus? Or are you doing payments directly to their property manager, and what the anticipated amount is. And we ask the anticipated amount because that just helps us be able to know where we're at with our match requirements for the grant. Oh, something to note with housing is that AmeriCorps, aka the OIG, has become a lot stricter about space. And so if it's an in-kind thing and it's like within your own organization, there does need to be a third-party evaluator that has to do like a cost analysis. So it's like a whole thing. Most folks don't do housing for us, our program anymore. So if you would like more information, please let me know. But that is a new stipulation. So just keep that in mind. But if they're just payments made directly to like their apartment or whatever, then that is just our direct cost. It's more the in-kind ones that we have to worry about. And then additional fees. So if you don't want to document the supervisor time or the member housing stuff, then you can just pay an additional fee per member. So then that will just kind of give you the information there, and it just calculates it for you based on your requested positions. So then at the very end, it's all just like calculated out based on what you had indicated before. So it'll tell you your total number of positions, the total value of your award. The reason that that's in there is to really help you kind of say like, hey, this is how much we would have been paying to have someone in this position or paying out. And then this is how much we actually have to pay with like our fee or whatever. So that's why the total value is included. It's just like a nice kind of way to look at it. And then it calculates your match. And then also if you're paying a fee. So that is all. That took a little bit more time to go through than I thought it would, but hopefully for most of you, it's kind of a review and a refresher. I tried to make the form simpler this year by just having more calculations out, and then I included the calculation worksheet. So hopefully that is helpful. But that's really all I had. So again, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me or to Carly. So you can, yes. So that's all I had. But so if you have questions, feel free to hang out. I'll stop the recording and we can go from there.